So welcome to my video which deals with the ultimate conquest part, and especially the part which involves gambling. And so far I have been pretty successful and people asking me for advice on how to gamble, so let me show you where I put my attention on, where I have my focus on, and how so far I have been successful. So first, what can you win with this competition? Well, you can win hearts, you can win heals, training, some marks of the dragon, some city exteriors, and some message pop-ups. So for me, which one do I find interesting? Well, of course, the Spirit of the Weirwood tree, which I will use later on with the Weirwood memories. The more I have, the better. The heals, which I use for all kinds of events. Training for troops, and Mark of the True Dragon to grow my little beastie. Right now I still need quite a lot of them. And the order that I actually claim them is first the hearts, and then I go for the heal, then the training, and finally Mark of the True Dragon. And as you can see by the number of feathers, I'm pretty much on the way to get also the maximum numbers of feathers from which I can claim this final reward that I'm looking for. So if you look at this screen and back again to the initial screen, what is more important here to pay attention to before you do anything? Well, the most important thing is look at the starting date. It says here it is 16. I'm looking today, it's the 15th, so I still have one day before this match, and actually before both matches start. During the day you can get a number of free feathers. You can get in total 40, 5 from gathering, 5 from attacking rebels, 10 from attacking rebels, 5 from alliance help, and 20 from the Weirwood tree. So ideally you want to get as many as feathers as possible before you place your bets. So don't place them before you have got all your feathers ready. So what also important is to know is that these match times are fixed. In this case they are both fixed between 1 and 2 GMT time. Sometimes you have alliances which are only based in one specific region, and if their match will be, let's say, take place for a time which is for them not convenient, you can bet your ass on that they're all gonna lose. So last tournament, for instance, we had N3O and they had a match in the middle of the night, and then their big guns couldn't play because it was a working week. But here, if we look at it, we see a Korean alliance, we see our multi-regional alliance, and Savo, oh, we know he will be awake, always awake. We've got the world top players with Chinese strong people, and we've got here Bloody Eclipse, and well, they are multi-region, but they might have a little bit of a handicap here. So what's also important to look here is the history of the alliance. So what did they do beforehand? Well, let's look first at the Korean alliance. You can see they pretty much crushed the cartel. They won from world stop play, so we know actually that WTP is pretty strong. They crushed the Mordman, and this is actually before this tournament. They crushed Rest in Pieces easy. Let's have a look at Run. They crushed Bloody Eclipse with a big margin. They crushed the Old Gods. They crushed Oblivion Dynasty. They crushed the Old Gods again. And this is before they barely lost from the WTP. So we know more or less how strong they are. Let's look at WTP. You can see here they won from the cartel. A win, nice win. But they didn't crush them. They did win big from the Russians. They crushed M3O. They just lost, as we saw before, from Immortal Korea. They crushed M3O again. Well, they had a pretty much walkover on mass destruction, and this is actually before the stuff. They just won, but they did not have the strongest players there. Actually, this is not UTP, this is not alliance. Let's look at here. They just won from Run, so we know they're pretty good. Let's have a look at BCL. You can see here they just won from DDR, but this was kind of an agreement prior to the match, so you cannot really say that much about it. You can do say much about it when you want to bet on it, which I did before. You see here before they were destroyed by run. Before they easy won from BDR. Look at this difference because later on we'll have a look at it again. They crushed mass destruction. They just won from the Russians. It's not a big victory. They had a walkover on the Nightwalkers. And this was the regular season, and this also appears to be just an agreement between both alliances. Now, why is this so interesting? Well, it's interesting because when you know the history and how they do, and you know how many players they usually show up, and let's have a look for instance at run, and you can see they come up with 95, 94, 96 players. You know they will score at least already quite a lot of points by simply showing up on the map. So, what do we know about this? Well, if we know that they will show up on the map, we also know that they will score at least the X number of points. And why is that so interesting to see? Well, these are some, let's say, predictions we didn't get before, based simply on the theory of them showing up. For instance, it was the first round. We had the Immortal Green World fighting the Northmen. I placed my bet on the Northmen. I expected them to lose. However, I did not expect them to lose with a gap of more than 65,000 points. Why? Well, I knew that Northmen shows up on the map. So that's at least 15,000, 16,000 points, which means that the other alliance has to score at least, say, 80,000 points, and then Northmen will not score any points. Well, that is pretty difficult. So that's why I put all my feathers, which I had at the time, on the Northmen. The Bloods versus Ash. I expected the Bloods to crush Ash, so I placed all my feathers on BDR. It happened. Then we have here again Northmen versus the Nordic Outsiders. I checked at the history of the Outsiders. They never beat anyone before with a gap of nearly 50k. So that's why I put my feathers on Northmen. I know that they would lose, but not with a big gap, and lo and behold, I won. Here we have again the Koreans, the Immortal Green World versus World Top players. I just made a small bet because I had some. I expected that VTP would lose, but not with such a big gap. So then I paid my attention to another one. Kings Away Lucky. That was always a pretty safe bet because they had a very strong player and they were very low in alliance power. So as a result, they were always challenged, let's say with a handicap, with let's say a losing handicap, the opponent. So here the old gods were expected to win from KAC, and even with a huge difference, 33k points or more. But in reality, Kings Away Lucky was at least as strong as the old gods, if not stronger. So I put all my feathers on Kings Away Lucky, and they did very well. Peacetown is just a very, very strong player. So I want that. Then they had to play against BDR, the Bloods. I expected it, Kings Away, to either lose, but just to lose a little bit, or to win. So no way they would lose with 54,000 points or more. So it was for me an easy bet, so I betted on KAC, and yes, they just lost, but not with a lot. Then the final match which I placed my bets on was the Blood Eclipse versus the BDR. Well, these two are nice sister alliances, so you'd know one alliance would not crush the other one. And for sure, they would not have the other alliance lose with that many points. And yes, it appeared to be pretty much a gentleman's agreement because both scored 60,000 points and the gap was not 46,000. also before with BDR, I noticed that with their matches, when they scored 80,000 points and they got all their rewards, they emptied the castle so the opponent could also score points. So that's why I knew when BDR would have 80,000 points and the other lines was already known to be defeated, they would still score lots of points. So when BDR, for instance, let's go back before, was fighting Ash, I knew when BDR would have 80,000 points, they would allow Ash to also score points, but they would never be close to 80,000 points. So let's look again here at my single predictions. So the Immortal Korean World versus Running on the Fear, it's going to be a tricky one because both are so strong, both do not want to lose. And the handicap is just too tiny, let's say, to put any bets on it. Let's say if Running on the Fear, if they were, say, 60 in power, so it was 76 versus 60, I would place all my feathers on Running on the Fear. But right now, it's too tricky. I'm not sure if the difference between these two, let's say, assuming that Running on the Fear would lose, if they would lose with maximum 3,000 points, I would not say that. Now, if we look at World's Top Players versus Bloody Eclipse, Bloody Eclipse has more power than World Top Players. So based upon purely power, you would expect Bloody Eclipse to win, but they would have to win with 7,000 points or more. Now, if we look at the history and remember again how World's Top Players did, for instance, against Running on the Fear, against Immortal Korean World, we know they did pretty well against both alliances, and we know also that BCL was hit hard, very hard by Run. I mean, where is it? Yeah, here. You know it. I mean, that's a pretty big difference. That's a difference of, what is it? 50,000 points or more. And we know that if we look back World Top Players, you can see they did very well versus Immortal Korean. And this is actually Fire. We know they did very well versus Running on the Fear. This was not full strength, but it says a lot. So when I have all my feathers gathered, in this case I would go and place my feathers on the World Top Players. So either they would win or they would lose, but not lose with more than 7,000 points. So this was my insight of how I look at this gambling thing and where I place my bets. And I hope you can make your own successful bets. And let's see, either you win now, maybe still enough feathers these rounds, because there are more rounds coming up, to get your rewards from the prediction shop, or maybe next round of the Ultimate Conquest.